Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We are your award-winning Tottenham Hotspur podcast. We are back during this international break for a feature special here on Last Word on Spurs. If you're listening for the very first time, where have you been? We're on iTunes, we're on Spotify, we're across all major audio platforms. We're of course on X, we are on Instagram, we are on Facebook too. And I'd like to be joining me again on this Last Word on Spurs, a very good friend of mine who, look, I think, bearing in mind the last couple of times we've done this, these shows have gone down really, really well. And I know everyone needs an uplift in the Spurs community at the moment, given that result against Fulham. It gives me the pleasure to welcome back to Last Word on Spurs, the wonderful John Wenham over at Lilywhite Rose. A massive emphasis on the youth of today, tomorrow, and the future. John, how are you, my man? Love to see you back on with us.
Hi, listeners. Hi. Pleasure to be back on the show. It's been a little while, and the first team have let us down a little bit last week. So hopefully we can pick things up with the youth and the players out on loan and show to a brighter future for Tottenham Hotspur.
Absolutely, mate. Nice chance to slightly get away from them, John, even though I'm probably going to ask you towards the end of the show what you make of them.
Yeah, look, I mean, the Fulham result was disappointing, but I think we still have to look at the bigger picture that we are in fifth. I don't think many predicted us to be in that position start of the season, in light of the rebuild, in light of a brand new manager, in light of losing, arguably our greatest ever player. So I think we will still comfortably end the season with Champions League football. And it's where we go from that. It's can we continue to strengthen and can we push on and challenge for, a trophy next year or higher up the table?
Absolutely. We're going to come on to them a bit later on if we have time. And just to give you a bit of a running order in terms of what we're going to cover during this episode with John, who we're delighted to have him back on once again. Like I say, I've got to say, the feedback we've had whenever we brought John on, and look, in general from the old days, John has been obviously a massive part of the start-up of Last Word on Spurs. Obviously, these days, it's more difficult around for both us, family and work life as well. But in terms of what we're going to cover for this show, we'll give a bit of a delve into where the under-21s, the under-18s are at. Since myself and John, we touched base, there's been a number of the youth players that have signed professional contracts with the football club. So we'll be discussing that. We'll be doing a general loan roundup so you guys understand where we are in relation to those players that are still very much part of Spurs' future and the hopes, of course, going into next season in relation to where those players go next. John will be telling us the players to watch out for ahead of next season and potential breakthrough stars on the map. Right, well, listen, John, we had a whole host of questions come in that I'll be providing as we go through the show. But I thought this is a nice one to start because, look, you spend a huge amount of your time dedicated to the youth of Tottenham. And that's where, again, your amazing brand has grown from. And take from this what you can in terms of this username. Martin Yole Shiny Head. He's got no hair, 86. He asked the question, a nice easy one to ease you in here, John. Why do we hype up our youngsters and then they don't get an opportunity? Why do we not promote them for a decent enough game time, but other clubs around us do? So a nice easy one there, John, to ease you in, my man.
Yeah, I think this year's been a different scenario. Obviously, look, we've had really limited game time. It was really unlucky to go out of the cup at, basically the first opportunity in both competitions. Really unlucky in the second round of the Carabao Cup to get Fulham, a Premier League team, away from home. We could have had many other easier opportunities like a home tie, and that could have been a chance to bring in some players. But obviously the lack of game time, the lack of external competitions, any European football has really limited the opportunities for some of these young players to come in, make a name for themselves and kind of make themselves undroppable for Ange and the squad moving forward. So I just think we've been a little bit unlucky. And, it's interesting. I think that whilst I think we'll finish in a Champions League spot, I certainly think in terms of youth development, there's an argument that were we to finish in the Europa League, for example, or the Europa Conference League, which I don't think we will, but I think there will be more opportunities for younger players to break in, to have that opportunity to play in front of a packed stadium, for lots of fans to learn who these players were, and for the manager to see how these players are, when performing with other first-team players. So I just think whilst we've had the lack of game time this season, there's been lack of opportunities. But as you said, you do look around the Premier League and see the likes of Miley at Newcastle at 17, starting week in, week out and looking very good. But Eddie Howe's a little bit further along in his journey than obviously Ange's at Tottenham. So I think we will see more youth in the coming seasons. I don't think we'll see too many this season, if I'm being honest, because we haven't got that many games, and I think the whole focus will be on the first team. And we've had a few players now return from injury. So even since January, we've seen the likes of Jamie Donnelly, no longer appearing on the first team bench and coming on with the return or the signing of Timo Werner and the return of Heung-min Son from Asia Cup duties. So I just think opportunities have been limited. But I think looking ahead to next season and how we can improve this moving forward, well, I think one, arranging strategic loans. So getting people out on loan after a pre-season so they can, establish themselves and hit the ground running at their club straight away. And I think if we're in the Champions League, that will be a good opportunity. But also, if we're in the Champions League, we'll also be back in the Youth Champions League. And that guarantees a certain number of high-quality games for our younger players to be involved in competitions. And, it was only last year when we were in that competition, we saw the likes of Mikey Moore and Callum Olasese as 15-year-olds playing in that tournament, which is an under-19s tournament. Amazing exposure and really brings you up the levels. So, yeah, I think we'll just be, depending on where we finish this season and what competition we can offer next year, whether more opportunities will be available, as well as hopefully some favourable cup draws. If we can get a home in the early rounds of the Carabao Cup and the FA Cup, that could be a really good chance for whoever's knocking on the door at that time to, stake a claim for themselves.
Yeah, it's amazing, Jonathan, that you have to remind ourselves that, this is the shortest season Spurs have had, I think, only for the last 10, 12 years. I mean, what is it, a 41 game
longer
season?
I mean, I'm going back to maybe 2005. I'm thinking of that year we went out to Grimsby at the first possible opportunity. I was about 14. Good. I remember crying listening to it on the radio. That was a long time ago, mate. So, yeah, it was that year. Long old time.
Good to know we're keeping it upbeat, John.
Yeah.
It's only Spurs. It can only be Spurs. A nice other question we've had come in here, which is one I think it'd be good for you to answer. Spiggy Tope, long-term listener, viewer of the show, asked, John, at what point is the homegrown quota a concern for the senior squad attended with lower age groups, if at all?
Yeah, so I understand the question. It's basically, are we now at the stage where we're developing enough good young players of our own that in future years we won't have any issues of homegrown quota restrictions? So basically, in short, for listeners, and I'm sure you've all heard this before, but just for clarity, you have to name in your Premier League squad 8 homegrown players, and they can be from anyone's academy within England and now Wales. From the ages of 15 to 18, they have to have done 3 consecutive years. So for the Premier League, we're normally fine because even the likes of Fraser Forster, Ben Davis, next year Pape Sarr, Maddison, Johnson, Sessegnon, if he's going to be there or not. So we'll be there, fine with those numbers, Oliver Skipp. But it's in Europe where you have the difficulties. Now in Europe, you have to have, amongst those 8, 4 of them have to be what's called club-trained players. Now they're players that have trained exclusively at your club. So this is where Tottenham have the issue. Where they always had Harry Kane, it was always fairly, straightforward because we had someone that not only was a world-class striker, but he counted as club-trained and homegrown. But now we have a slight issue, and that's why I put in a tweet a couple of months ago that I'm almost certain Oliver Skipp will stay at the club this summer. And I'm not saying he's going to start every game, and I just think he'll be a useful squad member as he is now. But he's incredibly valuable because if you can't name the 4 club-trained players in your squad, then you can't name the maximum of 17 foreign players. So you have to reduce the number of foreign players in your squad, which is obviously difficult. And in previous years, I remember we had to leave out the likes of Juan Foyth, Brian Hill, I think, was left out once. It's just a situation you don't want to be in as a manager, turning around, getting back into the Champions League and then having to say to somebody, oh no, we're going to put you out, and you can't play in this competition. So yeah, I think in years to come, we will be absolutely set with that, with the great crop we've got coming through now. But I think in the summer, you could also see some interesting moves in the transfer market from Tottenham to circumvent this issue. I could see a potential move for Kyle Walker-Peters be on the cards because he counts as having come through the academy at Tottenham, can cover as both left back and right back. Homegrown, has got 12 months left on his deal at Southampton, full England international. Now, I'm not saying he comes in and starts every game, but as a backup option on 2 wings, and he counts and allows you to name your full quota of 17 foreign players, it's incredibly helpful. So I think he's one to keep an eye on. But I do think in years to come, we'll be better set with this, with the likes of Jamie Donnelly, Alfie Devine, Alfie Dorrington, Luca Gunter. There's many in the squad that we hope, Tyrese Hall, that go on and develop and become mainstays in the side, and we can have a real crop and core of homegrown players. But we've seen, even with the recruitment of first-team players now, this start to yield success with Pape Sarr, for example, next year counting as homegrown. And some people, this will blow their mind that the whole time we had Eric Dyer, captained England before, born in Cheltenham, didn't count as homegrown, took up one of your foreign player spaces because he came through the academy at Sporting Lisbon. Whereas Pape Sarr, because he will have been at Tottenham now from the age of 18 through to 21, having done 3 consecutive years, will count as homegrown moving forward.
It's interesting that. Just because John, there'll be, I mean, many on Twitter, they'll be screaming at their phone or screaming at their TVs. You mentioned about Oliver Skip there. And I
Yeah.
mean, many will look to hope that Skippy does break through to the first team. Many will feel that maybe he isn't good enough. Is there an argument, John, that can't Spurs go out and essentially replace Skip with a homegrown player, such as I believe Conor Gallagher would count, and therefore they can allow Skippy to move on from the football club if they're looking to upgrade in that position, if you see where I'm coming from?
For the homegrown rules for the Premier League, yes, they could, but they could not do it for the European rules. The European rules are very stringent that you must have 4 that come from within your own academy. So that's why it doesn't. And that's why when people ask me, oh, Alfie Whiteman and Brandon Austin, they're still at the club. They're still at the club because, well, one, the Premier League footballers at Tottenham is an amazing opportunity that we'd all kill for, but
Yep.
they count as club trained. So they take up 50% of those spots. They take up 2 of the 4 spots in the squad that allow you to name the maximum of 17 foreign players. And I know this is incredibly confusing. Listeners and Rick as well can see your face, but yeah, you need 4 that have come through your academy, basically, that are over the age between 18 and 21, having done the 3 years. So that's why Whiteman and Austin count. Skip counts. And the 4th one is where we're going to have the question, because previously we had the likes of Harry Kane, Japhet Tanganga, Harry Winks. They're all gone.
Right.
So now you look at other options. That's why I mentioned Kyle Walker-Peters, but also you could look at Troy Parrott is now of the right age and has done the amount of time that he would also count as club trained from Tottenham. So whether or not he comes back into the mix, over pre-season and gets an opportunity to stake his claim, it's possible.
John, I'll tell you what, it's absolutely fascinating stuff. And I think it's funny because I see a lot of different people come back at you on your account when you tweet the likes of an Alfie Whiteman and suggest, why is this guy just actually at Tottenham? What's he doing picking up a wage there? And I think it's important that we make the point, some players are actually quite happy to just be part of Tottenham in any setup because it's a dream, right? I mean, as a fan, unbelievable, right?
Yeah, look, Alfie Whiteman, you couldn't find anyone more Tottenham than him. He grew up, he went to Northumberland Park School. He grew up in the area of Tottenham. He's a diehard fan, and loads of managers, and I've heard things from coaches at Tottenham and scouts and stuff, that they all say he's a really great guy. He's a good trainer. He never moans. He's there on time. He's punctual, and that takes you a long way in life. So, look, I think he's only ever had 30 minutes as a sub in the Europa League that Jose gave him. I remember he'd come on for Joe Hart in a game. But look, he works hard, and for a Premier League player, he will be on incredibly low money. Now, obviously, high money for us guys, but for a Premier League player, probably on £2,000 a week, something like that. It's £8,000 a month. It's good money. But for someone that had never played a Premier League game and he's around the squad, but as I said, he has value for other reasons. So as long as he's happy to carry on doing it, I think he's got a year left on his deal. I know Brandon Austin's out of contract this summer. Whether or not that gets extended, for the reasons I've set out, it's possible.
Yep. Well, listen, it's interesting. It looks like they may have a decision to make when it comes to the keeping situation there. Obviously, Forster was given a new contract recently, but given the way Vicario is as a goalkeeper, you'd imagine we're going to come on to this in terms of playing styles, whether the club will look to have somebody as an understudy of a similar frame to Vicario. But look, we've had plenty of questions come in. We'll dive into those. I'm conscious we're going to make use of John's time as much as we can. John, let's steer our attention towards the under-21s, under-18s. Some really good news coming out in terms of international call-ups, but I'm going to let you steer the ship in the direction you want when it comes to those players in those relevant categories.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a quick overview on the under-21 since we last spoke. Now, they've had a real change at the heart of the defence since we last spoke. So we've seen Brooklyn's Lions Foster leave the club on a permanent basis. We've seen Ash Phillips head out on loan to Plymouth in a really good loan, actually. He's getting lots of experience in the Championship. And then we had the same day, Alfie Dorrington picked up a 6-week injury. So suddenly you've gone from your 2 main centre-backs and you're holding midfielder and or centre-back cover all being out the picture. So, there have been some mixed results. They suffered their first defeat of the season against Everton at home with 10 men on the pitch. But they've been trying out different things. They've had a defensive midfielder in Dante Casanova playing at centre-back. They've had George Abbott playing at centre-back, who's naturally a central midfielder or a right-back. So they've really had to chop and change. But they still had some great results. I was at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium for the 6-0 win over Fleetwood, which was a fantastic opportunity to see so many younger fans there, taking in the stadium, seeing those next generation of players. And the boys really delivered. I think on the day, Jamie Donnelly laid on 4 assists. Will Lancashire grabbed a hat-trick, fastest hat-trick in the stadium. So, yeah, it was just a really good experience for the players. But, yeah, looking at how the team's kind of laid up over the last few weeks, what I said with those injuries, we've seen the return of Luca Gunther in goal. Fantastic young keeper. You talked about a Vicario understudy. They've got really high regards of Luca Gunter. I understand that the latest England under-19 squad, they've basically taken the second, third and fourth choice keepers to have a look at and told Luca he is the first choice. And that's why he's not been called up, which is, a great thing to hear if you're a goalkeeper and have not been selected in the England squad amongst all your Tottenham peers that are in it. But so Luca Gunter looks a really good prospect. He's been back in goal, made a massive save in the win at Middlesbrough last weekend, 2-1 win. So do check that out on the Spurs Academy page. They posted those saves, really, really top draw. The defence has been lined up with, as I said, the likes of Dante Casanova, George Abbott. We've seen Tyrell Ashcroft playing at right back. In midfield, we've had the likes of Niall John, who's been a mainstay. Now, Niall John's a funny one because fans will remember a couple of years ago, it looked like, I think it was the Nuno pre-season. He was really involved and, there's some talk he was going to be pushing on. Has got a contract for another year to run till 2025. But for me, I think it's probably time for Niall to seek out a permanent move elsewhere. I feel like sometimes you just need a change of scenery to really, develop and come into your own as a player. And I think there's players underneath him now pushing to get that game time and need that opening to develop themselves. The likes of Tyrese Hall, George Abbott, Rio Karamayton. So there are players waiting to come into a midfield free. And I think Niall, as well as Max Robson, who's been playing a little bit in recent weeks, is another one. He's got a year to go on his deal, but probably time to seek, a move elsewhere. And then obviously the forward line has been pretty standard throughout, which has been Iago Santiago, Alonso, Jude Soonsup-Bell on the two wings that have been really good all season. Both unlucky, really, not to go out on loans in January. But I think they'll both certainly go on loans next season. And we've had Jamie Donnelly playing in this more deeper role than we've ever seen before, which he now does with England as well. Still sort of catches my eye when I see him named as a midfielder. He was always the striker, was always the main goal scorer in the teams coming through the academy. So it's a bit of a change, but look, he's delivering in both positions. That's what a good player he is. And then obviously Will Lancashire is the out-and-out striker up front who has really developed this season to a very impressive standing, and I think he's another one who next season can go out on loan, possibly to League One, and have a really big goal-scoring season as a main striker for a club in that division. So I think that's really exciting. And just looking at some of the other results, we've had a 1-1 draw away at Arsenal. Again, we led for a long period of the game. Late equaliser conceded was frustrating, but 21s are still top of the league, 2 games in hand, and they're looking really good to finish top of that group standing rather soon.
It's interesting, John, because a lot's been made this season of the fact that it's been very much an alignment in terms of the general playing styles between what we're seeing in the first team to the under 21s and how that's working. Many will argue that, look, I think the first 10, 12 games of the first team was incredible. I think what we have seen, and I'm sure you can get your thoughts on it, that has become harder. I think many have caught on to the way Ange has tried to set the team up, and what we are now experiencing is a lot of low block teams essentially putting 10, 11 behind the ball and saying, break us down. And arguably the wins recently, I say barring Villa, haven't been the most prettiest on the eye. Is this something, John, we're also seeing in relation to the youth because they're flying high at the top? So I'm interested to know how they're adapting to the system and whether they also find that it's difficult in these kind of games where teams are deploying 9, 10 behind the ball. Is that a little bit different because it is more seen as a development model rather than all about results, if you see where I'm coming from?
Yeah, Tottenham previously always had an emphasis on just development of players, and they would even basically throw games to try players in different positions. So I even remember a game pretty recently. I saw Jamie Donnelly play as a centre back in a Youth Champions League game against Sporting Lisbon, just to try something totally different. They do test players out, but this season especially, we just have too many good players for the under 21 league. There are players in there that you could drop into League One, the Championship, and they'd be decent players in those leagues already. We've got 4 or 5 in that team that are just too good for under 21s football, and that's why they've been rolling people over and winning with such vigour and such style, quite often scoring many goals. So I just think that we are in a good position. And I think even next season, when 5 or 6 of the current 21s go out on loan, we've got enough good under 18s players to come up, and the under 21s will still be very good next season. I do think they probably want to make a couple of additions in the summer, but we'll come on to that a bit later when looking at the squad as a whole and how that might look for next season. But I think, the likes of Tyrese Hall, Mikey Moore, Leo Black, Demola Ajayi, you've got 4 or 5 players there that are already ready to play 21s and look good and do that for a year, 18 months, and then they'll go out on their loans. So we're developing a really good pathway now of players of a high standard. And it's just about making sure that their next if we don't have, European football to offer them, say Europa League, for example, if they're going to go out on loan, picking the right loans where they're getting 40-game season under their belt. We saw it work so well with Oliver Skipp. So it's not always that Tottenham loans are bad. We do sometimes nail it, and we're nailing it at the moment with Ashley Phillips, with Josh Keeley at Barnet. So some of these players now, the loans have been much better this season than many of the past.
Yeah, and it's just, John, you bring up there the development of those young players. I mean, I think you'll probably come on to this. I don't want to steal your thunder, but Leo Black, we've seen, has made his first start for England under 18s. They beat Czechia 2-1. George Abbott, you recently reported this in exclusive on your feed for Lilywhite Rosa. He's been called up to the England under 19s. He'll link up with Alfie Dorrington, Tyrese Hall, Jamie Donnelly, all Lancashire. So it does feel, John, that from the outside looking in, I mean, you're a lot more closer to it than I am, that these youth players are getting real decent recognition now, and a number of them are being called up respectively for their countries.
Yeah, and the level of these England youth teams is incredibly high as well. That's what you've got to consider. These England youth teams go and win a lot of the international tournaments. So the level of the players now being developed is incredibly high from this country as a whole. But if you're getting 5 in a squad of 25, so you're going there and you're getting 20% of the squad come from one club, you're putting yourself in a pretty good position. The other interesting point about this is, apart from Will Lancashire, all of those boys have been at Tottenham for a long period of time. It's not like a Man City strategy where and Chelsea, where they're stealing boys from the likes of Brighton and other clubs at 14, 15, 16. Most of these players have been at Tottenham since under 8s, under 9s. And that shows that we are, developing very good coaches at younger levels to bring through really good players that are now getting international recognition. Just on Leo Black as well, I was really pleased for him because he's somebody who, even if we were having this discussion this time last year, I would have just been saying, yeah, he's a kind of average right back, and I wasn't really expecting much of him. This season, the under-18s changed their style to match Ange's style. He's been playing as an inverted right back, and he's just taken to it like a duck to water. Honestly, he's come on leaps and bounds, and it's really great when you see that. You see somebody really develop and really push on over a 12-month period, and now he looks like an outstanding player in the under-18s team, and hopefully he'll go on and be an outstanding right back in the under-21s team, and then carry on moving forward. But he's just developed a real aura about himself on the ball, really tough in the tackle, really good feet with his passing, and then scored a couple of goals as well. So yeah, he's probably the one that development-wise has improved the most over the last kind of 12 months.
You chucked upon, John, the fact Spurs still remain top of the Premier League 2 table in relation to those under 21s. How much of an achievement would that be for Spurs to win that title in relation to that particular league? And what would that mean for that group of players? Is it, again, just that feeling of winning and how important that is when we've seen previous youth sides go on to win trophies, and how much that can hopefully benefit them in the pathway to the first team?
Yeah, well, I think it would continue a winning culture, because you've got to remember a lot of these players, this is why the under-21s are doing so well this year. The better under-18s players have moved up and become the permanent team. The likes of Jamie Donnelly, Alfie Dorrington, Tyrese Hall, Luca Gunter, George Abbott. These were all guys that played a key role in the under-17 Premier League Cup win and the under-18 Premier League Cup last season. So they're used to winning already. They've got the hunger to go and win trophies. And both of the wins in those cup competitions came at away grounds, Nottingham Forest and Aston Villa. So they're building a confidence in themselves to get over the line. And if we can bring that into the first team with a core group of young players that are, one, good players, but two, have that winning mentality in them, and three, are also mostly Tottenham fans, you're onto a good thing, and hopefully that can rub off throughout the squad. But yeah, so if they can win this under 21 Premier League, that will just stand them in good stead moving forward and get them used to that winning mentality.
Absolutely. John, you'll have to forgive me. I've been scrolling here because I've been trying to find the guy, and I've just actually found it. There was a great interview on Spurs Play with Simon Davis, the Academy Director, that spoke a lot with relation to how much more connected now it is with the football club, with Ange. I think when we last touched base or spoke, there's now, from what we understand, bi-weekly meetings that occur with Ange. We're not having a situation where players from the youth are no longer being used as mannequins with Antonio here. Bless him, a year later, since obviously his departure. It did feel, for those that haven't checked that out, that's, I believe, on Spurs Play for free
YouTube
at the moment.
YouTube as well, you can get it.
Yeah, YouTube. Really great interview with the Academy Director, Simon Davis, who spoke really at length about the relationship that he's got with Ange. And it just feels at the moment, John, going back to what you said there, great time for the academy, great development, great connection there from the first team downwards, right?
Yeah, it feels like to me this is the best structure we've had in about 15 years. Always go back to that period where we brought through the likes of, Stephen Corker, Andros Townsend, Tom Carroll, Ryan Mason, Harry Kane, all in one group. And 4 of those 5 went on to become full England internationals, and were sold, some of them for significant sums of money. So it does feel like we've got the right people in at the club now, and everyone is working together on a kind of strategy for Tottenham and to continue the pathway of bringing through these good young players, because it doesn't stop with just the under 18s. I know, for example, some, even these England younger squads, under 16s, under 15s, they've all got 3-4 Tottenham boys in the squads as well. So we are continuing this development plan throughout the club. And as you said, if Ange is on board with bringing through younger players, and I get the point that we haven't seen it yet, but as I said, I think that's to do with the lack of game time, the games basically. We haven't had the opportunity for Ange to bring in too many of the younger players. But look, he still has given Jamie Donnelly a debut. He still has had Alfie Dorrington and Iago Santiago Alonso train with the first team quite a lot, and others. We often see pictures of other players, dipping in. Max Robson was recently with the first team. So, if we can all work on a kind of strategic basis at Tottenham together and philosophies aligned throughout the club, that is only going to be beneficial to us bringing through, the next set of homegrown players for the club.
Totally agree.
And just another thing, I speak to a lot of agents and scouts and this sort of thing, and parents of players, and the feeling I get is this has been the best time they've known at Tottenham in terms of a overall happy, positive feeling to be at the club, and they feel like the club is going in the right direction. So it'll be about now proving that there is a genuine pathway to bring through young talent. We are successfully now signing young talent from abroad, the likes of Vuskovic and Bergvall. So we must be doing something to convince them and their agents to turn down, 20, 30 other European clubs that will be tracking all the same players as they do now with scouts all over the world. So it's about convincing our own homegrown young players that the opportunities are there at Tottenham as well. And that will be really key for this next stage of their development.
Out of interest, John, before we do move on, who do you give that credit to for that transformation?
It's interesting because I think under Fabio Paratici's time, I know people say he wasn't involved in, the academy too much and that sort of thing, but I think he was involved in raising the ambitions of the academy to people above, the likes of Daniel Levy and Donna Cullen, etc. I think he was involved in saying, hold on a minute, I've been at Juventus where we have partnership agreements with clubs all over Italy. We have scouts all over South America and other continents and countries. And I feel like he raised the ambition of the club. Even the appointment of Gretar Steinson, who came in, who I know had a big part to play in Mikey Moore renewing when lots of big clubs wanted him, and Tottenham to suddenly offer more money to these players as well. There was a situation only the summer before last where we lost 2 England youth internationals to Southampton. And that is an unthinkable scenario for Tottenham to be losing their 2 best players in an academy group at the time to Southampton, who can basically come and cherry pick your players on the basis that, look, we're going to offer them X amount more money than you are. And Tottenham were very rigid in their structure. But I think by seeing, so many of our good young players renew on long-term contracts, I think under Fabio Paratici, I think there was a realisation that we needed to get with the game. We needed to pay the going rate. I know under John McDermott, for example, who's now with England, that Tottenham were basically set on a pay structure. And if you thought you were going to get more elsewhere, then go. We won't match it. But that's certainly changed under Fabio Paratici. We're now offering competitive salaries with the other top 6 clubs, which has meant we've been able to hold on to our best young talents. And I think, I do understand the philosophy of not giving youngsters, especially, too much too soon, because you can lose the hunger, you can lose the appetite, you can feel like you've made it before you've done anything. But actually, if all your rivals are paying, X, Y, and Z amounts of money, you need to be matching that, or you're going to get left behind. And I think the summer we lost the 2 boys to Southampton was the final nail for Tottenham's previous strategies and structures in that regard. And they're now working to a far different capability and capacity. And we've seen that with the signings of Bergvall, Vuskovic, and also, Will Lancashire. It was unusual for Tottenham to pay £2 million to Sheffield United for a boy that Arsenal had released just 18 months earlier. Tottenham's going to hand £2 million to someone that was on a free 18 months earlier is pretty unheard of. So, yeah, things have definitely changed. And I think Fabio Paratici should take a lot of credit in that regard.
Yeah, man. Look, we have got loads of questions in on the loan players. They're going to come on to in a second. But, guys, I'll encourage you, for those, obviously, we're recording this live, but anyone wants to get their questions in the comments as John is speaking here, if anyone wants to get more questions into us, we can feed into John. We're happy to do so. John, Nick Teff asked the question. You brought him up already on this show so far. How good can Tyrese Hall be, in your opinion?
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, he's a really exciting central midfield player that sort of sets the tempo of the game around him. Really good quick feet, can dictate the game, takes leadership of the game, and has seemingly recently started popping up with really important goals as well. So he's another one, like Leo Black, who has finally got an England call up, much deserved, probably for about the last 24 months. So I was really, really pleased when he got the call up straight into the under-19s. And I think Tyrese can be a really important player for us moving forward. I think he'll probably look to do, one more year in our under-21s next year, really establish himself as the first choice central midfielder in that team, and then look for a season-long loan thereafter. That's the thing. I know we hear these because of, and I'm part of the problem, probably accounts like myself and others. We talk about these young players more and more from 16, 17, 18, and people say, when are they ready for the first team? When are they ready for some players aren't ready till they're 21 or 22, and whereas others, normally from abroad, actually, like Bergvall, they've got 90 senior games under their belt by the time they're 18. It's just a different way we do things in England. And I know there are exemptions to the rule, like Miley at Newcastle and others. But, players do just break through at different stages. Remember, Ryan Mason didn't break through at Tottenham until he was 23.
Harry Kane. Look at Harry Kane, how many loans it took.
So people just break through at different stages. But, when we're talking about Mikey Moore, he's still 16. So it's a long way to go, and there's all things that can happen between 16 and 18 to, the way you play football and your body and growing and everything else. So he's an amazing talent, as is Tyrese Hall, but these guys are still, very, very young. So they still need, in my opinion, a really good loan first before they can challenge for a first team spot. And when I say a really good loan, I mean a loan where you go out and play 40 games, week in, week out. There's no better way of developing yourself than that.
Yeah, I mean, look, Gollum says that how many England youth internationals end up having successful careers, example, playing consistently in the Premier League. I don't think we've got the actual formula or stat there, but I think, again, you look at the fact of how hard it is, John, you said there's to break through, and then number two, to maintain that consistency, right? It's just not easy to do so. We see now one of the toughest leagues in the world, the Premier League.
One of the toughest leagues in the world, and also that England setup's quite interesting because I feel like if you get in there when you're kind of under 15, say you're one of the star players, under 15, under 16, you then kind of stay in that squad unless you have a dramatic fall off, cliff. You stay in that squad all the way through to kind of 18s, 19s. And that's why the likes of Tyrese Hall, who's probably, in my opinion, should have been in the squad for the last 2 years, starting as an under 17s player, has just basically been overlooked because they stick with the same players and then they go away, they familiarise themselves with the England coaches and the setup. And it's really hard to get in and break in. So I was really pleased that, obviously, he's now got in there. But yeah, the levels are just so high, Ricky, to break into that England youth setup and also any Premier League club now.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, John, thank you so much so far. Let's turn our attention, John, if we can now, to, of course, where we are in relation to, I believe, the player contracts, right? I mean, we've seen the likes of Leo Black, Yusuf Ankham-Rich, Mason King, James Roswell, Roman Igan, Riley, Herbie James, Callum Logan, Damola Ajayi, all sign new contracts, professional contracts with the club since we last touched base. John, give us a flavour of what you believe to be the most important ones there are there for Spurs in the future, if you can.
Yeah, so they basically how it works is, you, first of all, I'll start from the beginning of the contract period to just explain to people. So you start off as a schoolboy player at the club. When you turn 16, you can be offered a 2-year scholarship. Now, a couple of the really exceptional players don't just get offered a 2-year scholarship. They get offered a 2-year scholarship and a 1-year pro, which is the maximum contract length you can offer to somebody of that age. So at Tottenham in the recent years, we've had that offered to the likes of Mikey Moore and Callum Olasese. They both signed those contracts last summer. Before that, we had it with Alfie Dorrington, Luca Gunter and Jamie Donnelly. So that's how it normally, so exceptional circumstances works like that. Otherwise, you get a 2-year scholarship. And then in your second year of the scholarship, Tottenham will decide whether they're going to offer you your first professional contract. And that's when you'd come into the under-21s the following year. But some of them get offered really early. So Tyrese Hall was one that got offered at the first possible opportunity. Oliver Iro was one that got offered very early as well. And now we're seeing some of the later offers. But what's interesting about some of the later offers is some of the players you mentioned there, Callum Logan, Roman Egan Riley, Herbie James, they haven't actually played very much, these guys. But as a sweetener basically of signing them to begin with. So Egan Riley and Herbie James both came from Man City's academy last summer, and Callum Logan came from Ipswich. They're basically offered a guarantee that you'll be signed, and also you'll get a pro contract as well. And there is arguments to and for that. Obviously that's how you sign the players. It's an attractive proposal, and that's why they'll choose Tottenham over, a rival that might be offering for them. But also it could mean that some of the existing players that maybe have been there since the age of 8, 9 or 10, who are as good, if not better than some of those players, end up not being offered professional contracts and kind of miss out. So it's a bit of a skewed system, in my opinion. And I think we'll see that this summer. That hasn't been announced yet, but when it's announced, which players have been released, I think there'll be a couple in there that will feel pretty hardly done by when looking at some that have been offered on the basis that they were promised this when they joined, but actually they don't play very much and don't really start for the under-18s.
It's fascinating stuff. I mean, John, out of those that we have penned down to new deals, any you should say, got to keep an eye on him? Any of those stuff I mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, look, Leo Black is one of the obvious ones, but also Demola Ajayi. This is somebody that has stepped up massively for the under-18, from the under-18s into the 21s in recent weeks. Scored a really good goal away to Middlesbrough last week, 95th minute to secure the win, but also started in the under-21s in the first game of the season in a 4 or 5-0 win at Manchester City. So he's really versatile, can play on both wings, can play up front as well. He's got good pace and power to him. And I think he'll be I think next season when we see a lot of the, more well-known under-21s, Donnelly, Lancashire, Jude Bell, Iago Santiago Alonso go out on loan, I think that will really open up the door for Demola Ajayi to become a real keen player in the under-21s and really cement himself and become more well-known to fans. But yeah, he seems like a really good prospect. So I think it was really important that Tottenham did get him signed down.
Hotspur under, and Zach asked the question, John, any players coming through from the under-16s and below we should know about? And I think this again partly answers the next part. He asks who have been given their 2-year scholarships for next season. That might just tie into what we've already discussed. But anyone from that age bracket we should keep an eye on that you know about?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a couple that have started playing up already. And how Tottenham tend to do this is those that they're really sure on and they know they want to be a part of the intake for next year start playing up. So we've seen a guy called Miracle Adiwal playing up in the under-18s already. He can play at right back or right wing.
So with a name like Miracle, I mean,
yeah,
can't go wrong, can we?
Can't go wrong, mate. And 2 positions as well. So yeah, Miracle Adiwal, and he started to play up. So he's obviously someone Tottenham have got high hopes for. Malachi Hardy, who's an England under-16 centre back. He looks a really good prospect. He's already started playing up as well. So you get an idea of the players that are going to be the key players in the group next year. We saw a lot of this, as I said, with Mikey Moore and Callum Olasese playing up as kind of 15-year-olds. But there's even a couple. There's a boy called Luca Williams Barnett, who I think he's 14, maybe just turned 15. He's already played up with the under-16s a few times. He's in England youth set-up groups, and he's really highly regarded as well. So it might be next season we start to see him playing as an under-18s player, 2 or 3 years above his age group, because they regard him as an outstanding prospect. And this isn't uncommon. I mean, Arsenal, sorry to talk about them, but they've got a boy in there under-18s at the moment, Max Doman, I think he's called, or Dowman. He's 14. So, younger and younger, they're providing these opportunities to players to say, look, we do see you as a key part of our future. And that helps in terms of signing scholarships and deals and all that kind of stuff, and showing there's a pathway at the club for that player. So I think we'll see more and more of the younger players playing up in, especially towards the end of the season, where they start to make decisions on who's going to get a scholarship and who's going to be part of the under-18s next season.
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched upon it. Can be quite brutal. I mean, in relation to those that will go, there will be players that will go there that, maybe arguably could have been given more of a chance when you compare those that they've signed, to professional deals. It's the nature of that industry, right? It's cutthroat.
Yeah, it's very cutthroat. And the angle we never see as fans is, that the mum or dad of that kid has driven them to Hotspur Way 3-4 times a week, given up probably a full-time job, so can only work part-time to accommodate driving their kid backwards and forwards for 8, 9, 10 years. And it can just come to it at 16 and they turn around at 15 and say, look, not for us, sorry. In fact, there was another story quite similar to that. There was a boy called Ramel Carter. People might know him more because he's got 150,000 followers on TikTok and Instagram as a kind of Nike freestyler. And he did a lot of JD Sports adverts and stuff like this. He was like a teen sensation or kid sensation, basically. He was recently released from Tottenham's academy and has gone up to sign for Hull. So, he was always the one earmarked as going to be the future star and going to push on. So, you never know what's going to happen. And it is a really, really cutthroat industry. And especially for somebody so young and somebody that only knows one club.
Yep. It's important to know that because, again, I mean, a lot of our focus, again, is on that first team. And we obviously judge the players week to week, game to game in what they're doing on that level. But below that, when you say, John, you go below the surface, there's a completely different level of competition going on, just how cutthroat that nature is. So, again, it is a really worthwhile reminder just to how the nature of football can be at that level. Now, look, we've had a number of players that are still out on loan that John has been very kindly keeping an eye on. I'm sure for his own benefit as well as ours as well. Let me make that clear. I think let's start with, if we can, John, what was obviously the real exciting deadline day signing of January for Spurs, which was the signing of Lucas Bergvall. Now, I'll pass over to you to tell us how he's getting on his parent club, merely so I don't actually butcher the name of them. How's he getting on there, John, ahead of joining the football club in the summer?
Well, I think the most impressive thing is that they Jung Gardens, I've probably got that wrong, but we'll go with that, have basically got their money for him, but they carried on playing him in the exact polar opposite situation that we saw with Vuskovic, where basically they got their money and then they were like, yeah, we're done. We've done our development of him. We've got the money across the line, and they stopped picking him. But with Bergvall, he's obviously such a good player that he's still playing every week. He seems to be contributing and scoring a lot more goals than I kind of expected of a midfield player. He seems to be scoring every loan update I do. He's scored or he's contributing goals. So it's really great to see he's carried on his progression. And I think what they'll probably look to do with him, I know there's been some talk that will look at him in the pre-season. I think that's probably wise. We'll see how good he is. Play him in a couple of pre-season games, take him on the tour of Asia, the pre-season game in Scotland as well, and then make a decision on him. But I think with him, it's about getting the right loan straight away where he continues to play. It's pointless him going, say, to a championship club and then it turns out that actually, he's on the bench most weeks, or that sort of thing. He seems like a really exciting young talent. And at the stage he's at, he just has to get game time and keep getting minutes. So, yeah, I think the best bet for him is obviously do the pre-season with Tottenham and then make a decision about a strategic loan for him where he's going to feature heavily. But yeah, he looks like a fantastic prospect. And obviously Tottenham did beat Barcelona to his signature. And, Barcelona are renowned for snapping up some of the best youth talent in world football. So that's really exciting.
We'll come on to Donnelly shortly, John. But King on the ask there, what do you believe the plan to be for Bergvall ahead of next season? Can you give us an understanding of what you believe that will play out?
As I said, I think they'll probably look to involve him pre-season and then a loan. I hope within English football, so we can acclimatise to the league here. Whether that be the Championship and picking the right club will be key.
Okay, we've got a question in here from Sad World, who says, John, how do you see us with the further development and relation with Djurgården and our academies entwining? It'd be great to cooperate with them as they have great senior figures in their A team with international experience. We'd love to see potentially a Donnelly Bergvall trade on July the 1st. I mean, again, it's been well documented out there that there seems to be a form of relationship taking place between Tottenham and the Swedish club. How much of a benefit can that be, John? And what do you personally coming out of it initially?
Yeah, huge benefit. I'm really a big advocate of working with other clubs and building these strategic partnerships and, placing, instead of just sending one player on loan to Sweden when they're in a totally new world, send 2 or 3 together from Tottenham that know each other, that can live together and can, embrace the culture there. I don't think it's the correct move for Donnelly. I think he'd be better suited doing a full year in the Championship next year. And I know that already that, most clubs in League One would put their hands up to take him next year. But if they can find the right Championship club to take Jamie, I think that's probably the best move for him. But there are other players that would definitely benefit from that link up and doing a full season in the Swedish league. Absolutely.
John, Alfie Devine, Ashley Phillips, both at Plymouth. How can you tell us about how they're getting on?
Okay, so they both started brilliantly. They were both signed and instantly put in the team with a manager that knew them from the England youth setup groups. Phillips has managed to, although they both dropped out of the team after a run of about 7 or 8 starts, Phillips has managed to get back in the team and re-establish himself in a back 3 that they're playing and doing really, really well by all accounts. Devine has found it more difficult, and it does then beg the question of, was it the correct decision to take him out of Port Vale, although it was in League One, but he was playing a lot. He was kind of, really influential and playing a lot of games there. And we've now taken him out and he finds himself on the bench at Plymouth. And he is still coming on almost every game, for half an hour, 25 minutes. And I'm sure it's still a good experience, the first ever season in the Championship or 6 months in the Championship. But yeah, it's frustrating that he's no longer starting every week. But I think it's good for a realisation for Tottenham fans that I don't see, and maybe others agree with me now, Alfie Devine, coming back and challenging James Maddison or anyone else for a place at Tottenham next season. I still think he needs that season on loan where he's the main man and does 40 games and develops that way before he comes into suggestions of starting for Tottenham.
It's interesting, John, because when you think about Lucas Bergvall, potentially him coming in for pre-season as well, and you keep Devine about, we'll have 3 or 4 creative midfielders if they do keep Lo Celso, which I think personally is unlikely. But I think it begs the question that you say. I mean, maybe like you said there, with relation to Devine, he needs to have a full season again in the Championship to keep on developing, right?
Absolutely. I think had this, in fact, even if he'd gone to Plymouth and played every game till the end of the season, the stark facts would still be he'd only ever done 6 months in the Championship and 6 months in League One. To then jump to the level of starting for Tottenham, who are going to be, hopefully challenging towards the top end of the Premier League, it's a big ask.
Absolutely. Of
So I
course.
still think he'd be beneficial that, look, for next season, if we could get another Championship loan where he was guaranteed to play for 6 months, fantastic. Reevaluate in January. And then if there is a Premier League team at that point saying we'll take him on loan and he will play, then you move him halfway through the season. But I think he has to do a solid 6 months in the Championship first.
John, Kevin Dyke, asked the question, what level do you think Phillips will be loaned out to next season? Surely he can do better than a team battling relegation from the Championship.
Again, Phillips he did 6 or 7 games at Blackburn. The games from January onwards at Plymouth. Which Premier League club is going to take him? It's possible that somebody might take him because he's got that physique, because he's a big, powerful lad, and he'll have contacts from his time at England and in the youth setups. But I still think if he could get another Championship loan next season and do another full season with someone in the Championship, that would be really beneficial. But I think we're positioned us, especially in those centre back positions, really well for the future. When you've got the likes of Romero 25, Dragusin 21 or 22, Van der Ven 21 or 22, and then below that, you've got Vuskovic at 16. You've then got Alfie Dorrington 18, 19. You've got Phillips 18, 19. So we've suddenly gone, and we've got a real future proofing of our centre back options, which is really great to see.
Yeah, absolutely, totally agree on that. And just in relation to where we are with loan players at the moment, Troy Parrott, it's an interesting one because this is a guy that feels like he's been around Tottenham, not say forever, but for a long, long time. I mean, again, he got the opportunity under Jose, where Jose then kind of threw it back in our face and said, "I told you he wasn't ready." If we remember,
Typical Jose.
Typical Jose. How is Troy getting on, John, and his loan?
He was doing really well. I think he's picked up an injury now, which has led to him being out of the Republic of Ireland squad. But I think from Tottenham's point of view, a possible sensible option with Troy, there was reported interest from Ajax and PSV for next season. I think they've got an option on his contract as well to extend him by another year. I think it's probably worth extending him and then seeing if an Ajax or a PSV will take him on loan without a buy option. Just put him on loan to one of those top clubs that play Champions League or European football. I know Ajax might not do next year because they've had a terrible season, but they're still a massive club, big stadium, good players, good history, amazing history even. Or PSV. If one of those clubs want to take him, and I think that could really see his market skyrocket to really high levels. Because you think Tottenham are heavily linked with a striker from Feyenoord now, Jimenez, I believe he's called.
Yep, Jimenez.
Parrott's numbers are not too dissimilar from him. So
Okay.
I would say there's still time to make a decision with Troy, especially as he's been counting as club trained and homegrown. He's more valuable as well from next season. So I think from a Tottenham point of view, it'd be sensible if there is that interest from Ajax or Feyenoord or PSV to really look at that as an option for a loan next season for Troy.
Yeah, Destiny Twist asked a similar question. What's the plan for Parrott? I think John has partly answered that. He's gone to say, I think he'd be great in the Eredivisie, but how do people at Spurs look at his development? I mean, John, I think what we have found out from, again, that recent interview with Simon Davies is that they are tracking evidently, week by week, game by day, and they're requesting the data on every single player. So the club will be acutely aware of how these respective players are doing because it will be a case that we want to move them up. And I'll come on to it in a second. There's players that Spurs have got out on loan at the moment that they're going to hopefully get some real decent value in the upcoming transfer market, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, loans work for 2 different ways at Tottenham now. We now have our loans of our young players that we want to go out and we want to develop and want them to become future Tottenham Hotspur players. but also loans that have worked really well this season of putting people out to increase their market value. And that works when they go out and they actually start every week and they show people, the level and the ability they've actually got. And the key one of that is Joe Rodon, who, had we been looking for offers in the summer after a disappointing loan spell at Rennes last season, what would have we got offers wise? 2 million quid, 2.5 million quid, near to nothing, because he wasn't playing. He wasn't.
If you're lucky, yeah.
If you're lucky, yeah. So now, we'll get all our money back as a minimum, in my opinion, which was 11, 12 million quid that was spent on him. But if Leeds could get promoted, he's become a mainstay. The fans love him. He's kind of a leader at the back for them. We could even turn a profit on Joe, which was unthinkable 12 months ago. So that's a loan that's worked really well. But then they don't all work brilliantly. Look at old Sergio Reguilon. Reguilon, 32 million pounds. Not really. I was hoping that Brentford, he would do something, and even if it was, 6-7 million pounds we got in the summer, but I don't even really see that now with a year left on his contract, and obviously the red card, really costing them the other day. So they don't all work brilliantly. The other one is obviously Tanganga, who this loan at Millwall has revolutionised his position really. And Tottenham will have an interesting option to make, because they can either release him on a free in the summer and sort of say thank you for your service and good luck, or they could turn around and say, look, we've got an option to extend him by a year. Let's extend him, but still sell him. And maybe if it's even £3 million, it's £3 million more than they would have got when he was sent back early from that loan in Germany, in January. So, that's another loan that has worked well. And I'm pleased for him, because Jaff's a good guy and a Tottenham fan, someone from the area, and someone that was a bit unlucky, in terms of when he broke through and not really cementing a place. It could have all been quite different for Jaff. So I'm actually really pleased for him that he's managed to get his career back on track, and they seemingly really like him at Millwall.
Just very quickly, John, I mean, what's the chance of him agreeing to a new deal, given the fact he's out of contract in a couple of months? Can you see it happening, or?
I think Tottenham have got the option in their favour, so I don't think it's really a lot to do with Jaffet and his Italian agent. I think Tottenham would just basically email and say, we've activated the option. You're now contracted till the 30th of June 2025, full stop. There's not much he can do really if it's in the option of the player, but this time it's the option of the club. So that's how it is. And they might just say, look, we'll still look to move you on to Millwall, but we're looking for... Tottenham might even say, as they've done with some of their other transfers, like Marcus Edwards and Jack Clark, that they'll basically let him go for a nominal fee, but they want a 50% sell-on. Jaff's still a young guy, he could go to the Championship, go to Millwall, could smash it, and suddenly a Premier League team wants to buy him for 15 million. At which point Tottenham would then get their 7.5 that way. So, they do come up with inventive ways of allowing, players to move on to clubs that maybe naturally couldn't afford them.
Yep. I know this one, John, isn't essentially a youth player, but he came through Spurs as a prospect in terms of coming as part of a decent deal at the time, it looked like. And I know there was reservations, given how much they still dragged on. You probably know where I'm going with this, is Jed Spence, who has been obviously part of the deal for Radu Dragashin over at Genoa. They seem to be fairly liking what they've seen in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
What's the chances, John, of that?
He does seem to dip in and out of favour, doesn't he? I mean, there are weeks where he got that 96 minutes away at Juventus with a clean sheet, and maybe he's one of those sort of players that can really gear himself up for the biggest games. Some players are like that in the big games, and when everyone's eyes are on you, you perform better. He might be a player like that, but I think for Tottenham, that you need to cut their ties with Jed this summer. There was a really interesting snippet from Phil Hay at The Athletic about his time at Leeds, and one of the real issues that emerged for him there was that he basically lived next door to Greta Steinsson, who obviously worked at Tottenham till last year in a kind of flat, and was booming music till 2 a.m. and that sort of thing. I mean, that's not ideal when you're next door to somebody that works for the club as the basically sporting director. To be doing that next door to him, and probably Steinsson, gave a good word for Jed to get him at the club. So it's kind of disappointing when you hear that sort of thing. But I think from Genoa's point of view, they've probably got themselves a pretty good deal here, because if he performs to anything of a decent level, they will take up the option to buy him, because it's really low. I think it's £8.6 million. It might even be euros. It's a really low option to buy, because for them, they then pick up a player that can play in Serie A for a little while, has the opportunity to increase his market value.
And they'll get that money back when they
if he's sold back to an English club, he counts as homegrown as well for English clubs. He did the time at Forest and Middlesbrough before, and Fulham's academy. So for English clubs who are struggling with homegrown numbers, they could see Jed playing every week in Serie A and go, hold on a minute, we can get this guy for 15 million or whatever he's going to cost, at the time. and they've got a homegrown player, despite the fact he's been playing through in Italy. So for Genoa, I think it makes financial sense to take him permanently, and I probably think they will take him because the option's so low.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. That, I mean, again, depending on how that plays out, that could be quite a lucrative deal for Spurs or Genoa, depending obviously how that player's form does continue. Final one I want to ask you about, John, is Alejo Veliz. Thoughts on that loan spell at Seville? I mean, look, at one point seemed to be suggesting that doesn't know what the future holds for him, and might be up for a potential longer stay. What do you feel is the situation with Alejo, as far as you understand?
Look, we got all the indications that this was going to be a good loan for him, that they needed him. They gave him the number 10 shirt. They presented him well. And on paper, it looked like a decent move because he'd be there with Lamela. They've got Eva Banega. They've got Acuna. They've got loads of Argentinian players at the club as well that could really help him settle in as a young guy in a new city. And I still think that even at the end of this loan, if he doesn't play again, it won't all be negatives. I think Seville are a massive club and big traditions. And I'm sure he's gained, good development from his time there, albeit not as much game time as we wanted. But yeah, in recent weeks, it seems to have really petered out and he doesn't seem to be playing at all, which is very frustrating. But again, I don't think he would have got those opportunities at Tottenham either, with the signing of Werner, with the return of Dane Scarlett, obviously couldn't be loaned out again, with Sonny coming back from the Asia Cup. I don't think he would have had any more chances at Tottenham than he's had there. So then the bigger question is, should he have gone out to an English club in the Championship, for example, where he would have been acclimatising to the culture of England, learning the language and, developing himself in English football? Would that have been more beneficial to Tottenham? It probably would, in my opinion. Especially for, somebody so young that's come from Argentina and uprooted his whole family and life to come and move here. Would it have been more beneficial for him to have gone to an English club? I think it probably would, even if that was a Championship club. And there's plenty of clubs in the Championship that are screaming for a striker at the moment, Sunderland being one, QPR being another off the top of my head. So, could more have been done to get him out on loan to an English club? And I think that will probably be beneficial for next season, to get him on a full season-long loan to a Championship club.
Final one I want to ask you about, John, is, although he's not on loan, is Dane Scarlett, obviously recalled by Spurs in the midst, obviously, of course, of this season. Not really predominantly featuring, been left out the last couple of matchday squads. Dane, I mean, look, he scored that great goal during, of course, pre-season. What a strike it was, of course, against Shakhtar Donetsk. What do you see the future holding for Dane Scarlett? I think I've asked you about him a couple of times when we've had you on the show.
Yeah, I think he's got a contract until 2026, so time's still on his hands for him and for Tottenham to see where Dane's future is going to go. I've always rated Dane really highly, as you know, and always remember him as a really good standout player in our academy. And also, he's still always selected for England at every age group level. He's now in the under-20 squad with Alfie Devine and Ash Phillips. This season has been a mess. Let's make no mistakes about that. Last year, although he didn't score as many goals as people wanted at Portsmouth, he still made 40 appearances in League One. For Portsmouth, for a big club, they shouldn't really be in League One, So he was playing in front of a packed Fratton Park every week and going away with big away followings, and that was all good experience for him. This year has been a mess. Obviously, he went on loan to, first of all, he came on for Tottenham in the Carabao Cup against Fulham, then played for Ipswich. Now, by doing that, he couldn't go to a third club when Tottenham cancelled the loan in January, or recalled him in January. So it basically meant he wasn't going to get a lot of football unless he was starting for Tottenham or playing for Tottenham's first team, which obviously hasn't happened. But he wasn't getting game time at Ipswich either. So it's just been a disappointing management of his season this year. Hopefully he still gained something from it, and his time at Ipswich wasn't a total, waste of time. But next year it has to be man there. If there's even if it's back in League One for a year just to regain confidence and become the main man at League One, I think that would be sensible for Dane. And as I said, with a contract till 2026, time is still very much in his hands, and he's still a young player, 19, 20. So I still think Dane Scarlett definitely has a bright future at Tottenham, and he just needs the next move has to be the right one. It can't be another year of no progress or treading water.
Yeah, it's just interesting, Jonathan. You look at those respective players who mentioned just how many of them are in different situations with regards to their respective loans. You've got some that are going to arguably have a real bright future at Tottenham. You've got some that are going to have a real bright future elsewhere that have done really well this season with regards to getting first team football. And there are those couple in there that really we're not too sure what's going to happen. So again, always interesting when it comes to that loan. So John, thank you so much for that comprehensive loan roundup. We're going to do a couple of quick fire questions that we've had in.
Rick, if I can, just one more loan. Obviously, Tottenham announced on their academy account last week, and that was the loan of academy first-year goalkeeper Sam Archer. Now, what was interesting about this was described as a work experience loan. just to add another terminology for all the dry loans we have and wet loans and all this kind of stuff. Work experience loan. And how this works is you're allowed to loan out a goalkeeper in a under-18s team outside of a transfer window to a club that's outside the football pyramid, basically. So a step below the National League team. In this one, he's gone to Burton Rovers, Sam, and it's just an opportunity really to go out, and it's a kind of month-by-month contract. He'll probably still train at Hotspur Way 3-4 times a week. Tottenham will still pay his salary, but it's just a chance to go and play senior men's football. And as a goalkeeper, there's nothing that can beat that, to go out and physically get game time under your belt. So we've seen that with last year, Kerry Glowdorn, who's the current under-18s goalkeeper. He went out on loan to Berkhamsted and did the exact same thing. So these work experience loans for young goalkeepers is really beneficial. It's just a different term for football fans, and I'm sure it will appear on Football Cliches podcast in time to come.
What I love about that, John, is you're now going to introduce another factor into the terrace now, when many will ask are some of the players that we've got in the first team on work experience, although given some of their performances. But look,
send Brian Hill back. He's done his work experience. Send him back.
Just can't get rid of him, like a competition winner still there. Listen, we're going to look to do some quick fire questions with John if we can. Look, this one is obviously one that we want to kind of touch upon because it's obviously key to the reason why we love having John on here. Sophie asked the question, John, is anyone in that group that we've discussed during the show in terms of under-18s, under-21s, likely to break through to the first team as a regular, or is a high chance that we might lose them as a promising player? And they're referring to the likes of Jamie Donnelly, for example, that really haven't had a massive opportunity this season. Or is there a case where, look, these guys will be rewarded in time with first-team football when hopefully we've got more games last season? They also mentioned the likes of course, that we didn't really give the opportunities to Marcus Edwards, Nuno Madueke. Obviously, of course, we saw him score for Chelsea last week. Any concern those for you, John, and ultimately players to watch out for?
I think not really many concerns. And the reason for that is that I think Tottenham are managing the contracts of these players far better than they ever have done before. So most of those you mentioned are signed up to kind of 2027, 2026. They're on long-term contracts. So Tottenham are kind of in charge of the risk of players walking away. Noni Madueke is always an interesting one. He actually left Tottenham as a kind of 16-year-old, didn't want to sign a scholarship and left over to Holland. So there was not much Tottenham could do. Rather than they lost him, they picked him up, I think, from Brentford's academy when they closed their academy. So I think he was only at Tottenham for 2 years or something anyway. He wasn't some massive player Tottenham invested loads of money on. He just decided to go and try his luck abroad, and it worked out for him, really, getting a big £25 million move to Chelsea. And in terms of players that could break through, I certainly think this is the most exciting core we've had for maybe 15 years. I think there's genuinely 4 or 5 that have a really good opportunity of breaking into the team. The likes of, Donnelly is the one I always mentioned, but Tyrese Hall, Mikey Moore, Alfie Dorrington. Now you're looking even further afield like Leo Black. So there's even the goalkeepers, Luca Gunter, Josh Keeley. You're talking about Vicario replacements. Josh Keeley can really play with his feet, and I think it really says a lot that Vicario went out of his way to go and watch a Barnet game to check in on Josh, to see how he's getting on. You don't see many Premier League keepers stepping down to the non-league to go and watch a game in their spare time, and that shows, one, what a good guy Vicario is, but two, imagine the confidence boost that gives Josh. Playing in goal, up and fuck, Vicario's there. That's amazing. And he obviously would have got to know Josh from going on the pre-season tour. Josh is obviously a starter for Ireland under 21s, so there are really high regards for him. Don't for fans listening, don't judge alone at Barnet as like, he's not going to do anything. This is just to get in game time. He'll go up 2 or 3 divisions next year and will be a starter, if possible, in League One. And I think they've got a really good plan for Josh Keeley, and they really do like him at Tottenham. So he's another one who could definitely break through. Callum Olasese. So we've got a few at the moment who I think, if everything lines up perfectly, Will Lancashire, there are opportunities that we could see, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 breaking at Tottenham, definitely.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, Spurs have announced they're going back over to Oz at the end of the season. They've got obviously career coming up as well. I mean, I just would imagine, John, this would be a great opportunity for a number of those players to show Ange what they're about, right?
Amazing opportunity, especially I think the post-season tour even to Australia to play Newcastle, because I think we'll have players off, possibly being told they can't go on that because they've got to prepare for the Euros and other competitions, at which point the younger players will step in, and that's an amazing opportunity to impress Ange. And if not, the pre-season tour in Australia will be an opportunity to impress Ange.
Yeah, totally agree. Just a couple more, John, just these final quick ones here. Mark, going back to what you said about Keeley there, Mark asked the question, we're forced to staying for another year. The next 18 months presents an amazing opportunity and chance for one of our young goalkeepers to take a plane as not only the third, but also our second choice. Given Keeley's general positive loan and Gunter's strong progression, who is best placed in your opinion?
I would say Josh Keeley at the moment, because he's actually out playing men's games.
Yep.
Look, we're talking about the Ireland under-21 starting goalkeeper and the England under-19 starting goalkeeper. They're both of huge talents. But look, there is another argument that what's the point of sitting on Tottenham's bench for 45 games for Vicario next season, or 60 games for Vicario next season? It is better to go out and do another full season playing for young keepers. It's a really hard balance to be a second choice keeper at a club. You know, when you're of that young age, you just need to be out and playing every week. So I would rather that Luca Gunter and Josh Keeley both went out on loan next season, did full seasons on loan. And if we need to sign a second keeper who's of a decent standing to come in for a couple of years as a backup, then so be it. But I'm hopeful that Vicario will be our number one for a really long period of time. So I think he's a truly fantastic goalkeeper and a great character around the club.
Yep. A nice easy one to end it on, John. This is from Linda Hudson, who says, your thoughts, John, on making all academy players obtain referee qualifications. Would this make players better in some way? If so, should this be beneficial to the club? Or if it isn't, is this a great pathway for players to consider?
It's definitely a great pathway for players to consider because, you know, like I said, we talked earlier about the harsh reality of when players leave the club. What do they do then? But obviously, refereeing is available all over the country. You know, I pay refs every weekend for my daughter's team. They get 20 quid a game and they do about 5 games on a Saturday. Now, as a 14-year-old, you make 100 quid in cash doing that every Saturday. It's not a bad little earner for 14, 15-year-olds, you know. So, yeah, I mean, it would be good. And I'm sure they'd understand different areas of the game and why maybe referees get, you know, frustrated with certain situations. And yeah, so I think that would be a really good, interesting idea.
John, mate, thank you so much. It has been like mastermind. You answer every question we put to you and do it eloquently so well, mate. It's always a pleasure having you on. And mate, listen, for those that don't know where to find you, I can't believe they don't. I mean, look, I know the club have got their own academy outlet out there, but I know I speak for many when they say you are the one-stop shop, the source we all go to, the man we go to when it comes to the youth. Where can those find you that don't know where to find you on the socials?
Yeah, I mean, Twitter or X, Instagram, Facebook as well, always as at Lilywhite_Rose. And at some point, I will return my youth podcast. Thank you, all listeners and messages I get all the time asking, when's it coming back? It will come back, and it will also come back with a kind of YouTube element to it as well.
Fantastic.
So in the near future, that will be coming. I just need to find time to crack on with that. And Ricky, you know, I don't know how you do it, mate. You know,
I know how to do it.
Similar situation to me, kids and family and everything else. It's not easy, but yeah, I do want to carry on putting out this content, and hopefully soon we can have an announcement on that.
Amazing, mate. Look, it's always fascinating stuff. Look, we'll hope to catch up with you, John, maybe over the summer, where hopefully, listen, it's going to be a real positive time for the club in general. Hopefully there'll be a return to Europe, depending on what competition that is. But I'm sure, John, you echo the thoughts that, look, get behind the boys now. Huge games coming up for Tottenham. I mean, no matter what, I think there is the consensus out there. It does feel like, John, very quickly the club are on the right progression route.
Absolutely. Look, he sees 3 losses in our last 13 Premier League games. We are on the right track. I know there's a lot of worry about the fixtures in April, but all I can remind people is that we've played Arsenal away, Man City away, Man United twice, Liverpool at home, all in the Premier League. We're yet to lose a game. We will not lose all of those games in April. We will win a few of them. We'll surprise a few people along the way, I'm sure. We'll cause a few upsets along the way. I'm very confident that I still think we'll finish 4th. But look, if we finish 5th and it seems like that's going to be a Champions League spot, then that should still be viewed as a huge success when you consider where we were last season, finishing 8th, the kind of disarray amongst the squad, the fact that we've had a complete rebuild of the squad, and we've now got a core of young players, Udogie, Sarr, Van der Ven in particular, Johnson, that not only are they great young players now that are all becoming full internationals for their countries, Porro as well, including that. These guys are just going to get more valuable, more experienced, more understanding of the Premier League each time they play and each season they play. They're going to get better and better and better. So I think we're on to something really promising at Tottenham. I think if we can get a couple of the right additions in the summer, the right characters, as we've done really the whole time since Andrew's been at the club, it's been a key point of getting the right characters in. Doesn't matter how much talent you've got, you need to be able to have the mentality to play for Tottenham and appreciate playing for Tottenham and understand what it means. And, you know, Vicario and Van der Ven and Maddison have all just took, you know, really easily to that. So I think if we get the signings right in the summer, I think we can challenge towards the top of the Premier League next season. And I think it is a really exciting time to be at the club. And I'm looking forward even to the Euros this summer and hopefully seeing the likes of Vicario and Udogie starting for Italy, Van der Ven starting for the Netherlands, Oro starting for Spain. We've come a long way in a short period of time, and also look at the emergence of someone like Pap Sarr. That performance at Villa second half, mate, was absolutely phenomenal. He was winning everything, controlling the ball, dictating the game. I think we've got a really exciting future on our hands at Tottenham, and it won't take much to really propel us up and hopefully get those trophies we all crave and all desperately want to see Tottenham lifting.
Oh, man, and one thing I'm sure, John, as well from your time at looking at youth and young players is there's always natures of inconsistencies, right? I mean, this is the thing, when you're dealing with young players, unfortunately, it isn't 10 out of 10 every week. There is that growth, as Ange just talked about, where it's not going to happen straight away, right? It is a process.
It is a process. And look, Fulham was hugely disappointing. I'm making no excuses for that. But what I will say is that, look, it was frustrating because we had our best result of the season, that 4-0 win at Villa Park just 6 days before. But Fulham, I know mugs, Fulham are the home game, they tested us. They obviously knocked us out of the cup, albeit on penalties. They beat Arsenal at home in December or January. They've had some decent results for them. They won at Old Trafford as well. Moniz is in the form of his life. He's having that real breakthrough period, someone that no one had heard of before the start of the season. So everything's kind of was going right for them on the day, and everything just went wrong for us. We did have opportunities, earlier on in the game, and had one of those gone in. I think back, especially that Maddison one that went just narrowly wide of the left-hand post. Things could have been very different, but it wasn't to be. But we've got Luton next. That has to be a win, and we'll keep pushing on because Villa and United even, they've got really difficult games to come as well. It's not just us. So I'm confident that we will be in the Champions League next year, and I think Ange will deserve huge credit for coming into the hardest league in the world and doing that in his first time of asking.
Amen. John, it's always a pleasure, my man. Thank you so much. Those that will be viewing and listening will be keeping their eyes peeled for what's to come from your world over at the youth. Listen, John, thank you so much, guys. For the watching audience, thank you. For those that listen on audio, again, thank you so much for your support. We're back with you soon. From myself, from John over at Lilywhite Rose. Guys, keep safe, keep well, and as always,